Hey, what's up? Justin here, and welcome back to 65 Drums. Tell me if this has ever happened to you before. You're sitting down to record a drum cover, and so far, everything is going according to the plan. You've chosen the perfect song for this cover. You've chosen the perfect kit to complement that song. You're also absolutely nailing every single groove and every single overly complicated fill that you've crammed into this song. Your playing is on point. The real problems pop up when you actually go to watch the video afterwards. While your playing was nearly perfect, it turns out that your kick drum was way too quiet, the music was way too loud, and it turned out that your snare just didn't fit the song as well as you thought it did, and you need to switch the snare to something else. If you record your drum cover in the way most people do, that's just having two lines, right and left audio coming from the master outputs of your drum module. If you record that way, everything's already baked in. You can't change the levels of your kick drum, and if your music is going through the aux input of your drum module and piped out through those two same lines, you can't even change the music volume afterwards. Now, of course, I need to stress that there's nothing wrong about using drum module audio, especially if you have a really nice sounding drum module, and especially if you have direct outputs for your kick, your snare, if you have like a nicer drum module, such as an Alesis Strike or a Pearl Mimic Pro. There's some modules out there worth buying just for the module audio. However, 99% of drum modules just don't sound very good. You're gonna wanna start using drum software because it just sounds that much better and gives you the ability to change out individual drums a year later if you want. You can completely revamp drum covers long after you've already finished recording. And you can fix problems that you can't really fix if you're just using, regular drum module audio. So before I jump into the nitty-gritty of the tutorial, how you actually tie all this stuff together, let me show you why it's so useful. So the program that I'm using to record everything is called Reaper. Reaper records what I'm doing. But if you look here, it's not actually recording the audio of the drum set. It's recording little descriptions of what drum I'm hitting and how hard I hit it. Each dot is a different note. I believe these dots up here are my hi-hat hits, if I'm correct. And so it's saying Justin's hitting the hi-hat here at this velocity. It's up to another program, this little plugin called Superior Drummer 3, to add a sound for each one of those little dots right there. Now, you can see why this is going to be so useful. I can save this file and completely change out the kit whenever I feel like it. I could recreate this entire drum cover in 10 years and just choose some other plugin that happens to come out later on, and that will give the whole song a different feel. You can also delete notes if you want. So for example, if you had a miss trigger, you hit one of your floor toms and another floor tom triggered for some unknown reason, you can actually just click on that note and get rid of it. It's really powerful and it can be abused and make your recording seem overly perfect, and some people do that, but I usually just leave it as is, and I only really adjust stuff when it's really needed. Plugins will sound better than your drum module. This is basically a little virtual drum module that lives on your computer. So these sounds are incredibly high quality. Look at this. It's over 4 gigabytes for this kit that I've created right here. I call it Metal Justin, but it's really just a slightly tweaked kit. Where is it? It's this one right here. It's basically this kit with a couple of different toms and stuff like that. These are some really high-end sounds. This is a Pearl Masterworks kick drum. This is 3 snares layered on top of each other, and actually the kick drum's a bunch of kick drums. And the toms, you can retune everything after the fact, and I can switch it out. I'm recording a bunch of different drum covers here, as you can see if I zoom out. This is like 25 minutes of me playing. I recorded a bunch of different drum covers back to back. I just went in there and decided, you know what? I like this kit for this song. I like this kit for that song. So you can actually load out a completely different kit. Let's go over here to something else. So I'm gonna go to a different sound library. Let's go to Rock Warehouse. And it's just so easy to change stuff on the fly. So I can just hit that snare, and while I'm listening back to the recording me playing, I can switch out to a completely different snare, and then a completely different snare, and go over to the hi-hat and just tune it down or tune it up or just change the levels of it. There's lots of different things that you can do here. If you go over to the mixer section, there's all kinds of different routing options that you have in EQ and individual buses and mics and stuff. It's crazy the complexity that gets in here. So again, this takes more time to set up, learn how to use, and you might have to spend a little bit of money, but the end results are worth it for some people. For other people, you don't want to learn about all this stuff, then that's completely fine. Continue using your drum module audio instead. But this is a better, more flexible way to do it if you want to take the time to learn how to use it. Okay, so now we're moving ahead to the how-to section of the video. How do you actually set up a drum set and the software on your computer to get all this up and running? I'm going to be doing this from a Windows perspective. If you have a MacBook or if you have a Mac Mini or something, you can still sort of follow along, but really this is more for the Windows users out there. There's plenty of Mac tutorials out there if you want to go look those up on YouTube. Okay, so step one starts at your drum set. The goal here is that you need to connect your drum module over to your computer. If you have a little USB port on the back of your drum module, like most people will have, you'll just need a USB cable like the one found on the back of your printer. It's really as simple as that. You just plug one end into your drum module and the other end into one of the ports on the back of your computer. Now, it's a little bit more complicated if you have an old drum module. If you have something from like 1999, you'll probably just have a MIDI out port on the back of your drum module. So you'll need to buy a little dongle that goes from MIDI over to USB. There might be a little like boxy thing in the middle of that cable. Or you'll buy a MIDI cable going over to an audio MIDI interface, and then that will then go on to your computer via USB. So it's a little bit more complicated if you have older hardware. I know I said this earlier, but it's important to mention again that you're not sending audio from your module over to your computer. Only a couple of modules can even do that. The Roland TD30, the TD50, and maybe another one that I don't know off the top of my head. Really, what you're sending over is MIDI information. Not audio, just little blocks of information describing what drum you're hitting and how hard you're hitting it. It's up to your computer to then add a sound for each one of those little MIDI notes. Okay, so moving ahead to the next step, you need to download two programs. The first is called a DAW, the second is called a drum plugin. The DAW that you're gonna download, I downloaded Reaper, you can download whatever you want. All this does is record those MIDI notes as you're playing them. The second program lives inside of the DAW, and this is called a drum plugin. This assigns a sound to each one of those individual MIDI notes, so they work together. Okay, so step three is you need to plug in your headphones, not into your drum module anymore. You're just gonna hear drum module sounds if you do that. You're gonna plug your headphones into your laptop. And you need a long extension cord most of the time for that. I've got like a, like a 15 or 20 foot cord that goes from female to male. And then I plug my in-ears into that. So it's just basically a long extension cable for audio. And that way the laptop can be in front of the drum set and then I can sit down and play it from far away. Okay, so moving ahead to the next step, a lot of times people have this problem where they plug the drum set into the laptop and for some reason their DAW, Reaper in this example, just can't see that something's plugged in. So if you go over here to the top right and click this, you'll get into the Reaper preferences option. Go here to MIDI devices. Now, sometimes when it just doesn't see that anything's plugged in, you'll either have to turn your module off and then turn it back on, or you'll have to turn Reaper off and then turn it back on. Sometimes it's one or the other. And when it does actually pop up, you might have to click on it and then enable input from this device and then press OK. Okay, so moving ahead to the next step, we need to make sure there's no delay between you hitting a drum and actually hearing the sound come out of it. That's very common. It's called latency. We need to lower the latency to as low as we possibly can get it. So the first thing you need to do to make sure latency is really low is lower the buffer size. So we're over here in Device, ASIO Configuration, and we're gonna move the buffer size down to 64. Initially, it usually starts out at 256 when you first set everything up, and then you can manually put it down to 64. You can also go all the way down to 16 if you want, and that will get it down to a buffer size of 2 milliseconds, but my computer can't handle 16. It usually just handles 64 okay, and anything below that, you start hearing like pops and crackles and stuff. So you wanna make sure it's around 64 and then lower it, see if that works, and if not, you tried. One quick thing to mention, you'll notice that my audio thread priority is set to highest. That way, this program is taking precedence over any other programs running in the background on my computer. And then of course, click apply. Okay, so this is probably a good time to mention that I'm not using the headphone jack on my laptop like I said I was. I'm actually using an external device called an audio interface to use as my headphone jack. This theoretically helps with latency. With my Windows laptop, even with this external audio interface, I still have issues of stuttering and stuff when I'm running too many audio related programs at the same time. So yeah, make sure you don't have any other programs running in the background such as YouTube or Spotify, and just make sure that you're just running the drum program and your DAW. Now, of course, I know what you're thinking. Justin, how are you actually playing along to any songs if you can't have YouTube running in the background? Well, with my particular computer, the setup that I have right here is I'm actually plugging the audio from my cell phone into the aux input of my drum module, and then I'm running the drum module audio via these two cables into the audio interface. And if we look back at Reaper over here, these two top tracks right here, right and left, This is just coming from my drum module. This is just the songs that I was playing to when I recorded all this stuff. I'm listening to my audio coming from the aux input of my drum module, coming from YouTube on my phone. So that's how I'm doing it. Now, for some reason, apparently Macs don't have this problem. They can run YouTube in the background and their DAW and Superior Drummer 3 without any major glitches or issues. But in my experience on Windows, that hasn't been the case, unfortunately. I don't know about your computer. My computers have just had this problem. Another workaround is you could just drag the song file straight into track 1 inside of Reaper, press play, and start playing to the song. That way, the processing is just done with inside of Reaper. It doesn't affect it as much as having Chrome and then loading YouTube inside of Chrome. Another workaround is have your phone connected to a small mixer and basically your laptop plugged into that small mixer, and then your headphones aren't plugged into the laptop, but they were also plugged into the mixer, and you just mix the volume of the music and the laptop together. So that's another workaround you could use as well. I should probably also mention that this menu will look different if you don't have an audio interface. You probably won't natively have ASIO downloaded. ASIO is an audio driver. You can download it separately from a website, but it won't natively be on your computer just because. So if you don't have it, you might have to use direct sound and then go over here to samples and manually type in 64 and then press apply. So you see the latency is down to 11 milliseconds now, on top of the latency that your drum module produces, unfortunately. Or you could just download ASIO. There's a website that has ASIO. It's a free driver. You can download it, and it actually does help you a little bit in my personal experience on Windows. Now, when you open up a new session with inside Reaper, you won't see any of these audio tracks. It'll just be blank, and it will be kind of confusing. What am I supposed to do now? In order to open up a new audio track, all you got to do is go over to this blank space and double click. And now you have a new audio track. But if you go over here to FX, you click on that, and then you go over to VSTi. This is where you'll be able to find all of your drum plugins that you've downloaded to your computer. So if I click on Superior Drummer 3 and press OK, it eventually will load it up. And I'm also running OBS to screen capture all this. So that's an extra thing my computer's trying to do. So it's a lot that I'm asking my computer to do at the moment. A lot of times Reaper will ask if you want to have this entire plugin just be one track that you can turn up and down, or if you want to break it down, because I could open up Superior Drummer 3 to have an individual track for my hi-hats, my toms, my kick drums, and my cymbals, and just have a whole row of tracks down here. I can go about it that way. I prefer just to have one track. Another thing that I need to mention right here is that you need to select your drum module inside of the drum plugin. If we go over here to settings and then MIDI eDrums, and then we go over here to use preset, default, and then select Roland, and my drum module is the TD30. Now this is mapped correctly for my drum set. Sometimes if you just use the generic preset that's automatically loaded up, you won't get the right sound. Like you might hit a floor tom and hear a cymbal hit instead. So you need to make sure that you go inside the MIDI eDrum settings of your drum plugin and select either your brand, or in this case, they actually let me choose my exact drum module. So that's really important. Sometimes people get confused about this. That's what you need to do to make sure it plays correctly. And you can listen to your drum cover forever, just over and over again with the music, get the audio levels of the music right, get the audio levels of your drums right, and EQ everything correctly. And then when you're finally ready to go, you can go over here to File, you can go over here to Render, and then you just give it a name. You decide if you want all the individual tracks or just one master mix track, and then you press render and you're good to go. If you start getting into drum software and you learn that you really, really like it, you might want to have a dedicated computer setup for this sometime in the future. I'm using an old laptop that has a broken screen on it. I can't actually close it anymore. It's permanently stuck open unless I buy parts on eBay to fix it. So what I'm using right here is a small laptop stand that I can raise and lower with a little pedal on the ground. So when I'm sitting here, I actually have my notes for the video that I'm working on over here so I can look at it and see what I'm supposed to talk about next. And whenever I want to use this with my drum module, all I got to do is raise it up a little bit higher so I can edit stuff standing up. I roll it a little bit closer to my drum set, just out of frame of the camera. And that's how I use it with my drum set. It's on wheels, so it's really, really portable. Some people, what they'll do is they'll buy a small Mac Mini for just a couple $100 off of like Facebook Marketplace or maybe Craigslist. Then they'll buy a really cheap monitor and a cheap keyboard, and then they'll install that into this dedicated computer setup, maybe on a desk next to their drum set. Just having a little setup just dedicated to your drum set, if you really like drum software, it might be the way to go. Again, I would test drum software off first before you go buy a dedicated rig just for it. It can be a little bit frustrating because you'll run into problems you don't really know the answer to. You'll have to look on whatever Reddit or whatever drum forum that you can find the answer on. It's a little bit frustrating getting this stuff set up. If you're not into computers, I do not recommend using this stuff because it's a lot if you're not into computers. But if you poke around long enough, you will be able to figure out. Just go watch the different videos on my channel and other channels, and eventually you'll have a really nice result. If you're interested in a part 2 of this video where I cover more of like the lighting, the camera, the moving angles, and how I edit stuff inside of Adobe Premiere Pro, let me know if you want to see more of like something covering the video aspect of drum covers. I might do that as well. Have an amazing day. Thank you so much for watching. And again, go follow me on Instagram because that's actually where I post my drum covers. See you guys in a few.